In this video, I'm going to do a quick review of a recent case called the Hoff case out of New York from October 2025. And it's an important case in that it tells us how courts are going to look at domicile and determining how domicile is determined for state income tax purposes, which is very important if you've moved from one state to another state, especially from a state with a high income tax to a state that maybe has a lower income tax, and making sure that your domicile is established in the state with the lower income tax. This is an important case to understand and to go through. So I'm going to summarize this case in this video here. So what happened in the Hoffs case, the Hoffs had purchased a condominium in Florida in 2015, but they continued to live, work, and file their income tax returns as residents of New York until 2018. For 2018, they filed an income tax return reporting their Florida address, asserting that they were part-year residents of New York and had moved out of New York on October 29, 2018. For the year 2019, the Hoffs reported that they were non-residents of New York, and then in 2020, the New York Division of Taxation audited their 2018 and 2019 returns and issued a notice of deficiency for $59,648. plus penalties and interest based on their determination that they remained domiciled in New York in 2018 and in 2019. Despite their protests of the notice, the tax deficiency was sustained, and they filed a petition with the Division of Tax Appeals in New York. The administrative law judge also concluded that the Hoffs had failed to show that they had changed their domicile for the period in question. And so it's important we go through and determine how domicile was determined by the court. The tribunal noted that although a party's domicile is determined by their subjective intent, proof of their intent rests on an examination of objective criteria. The tribunal, after examining several objective factors, including where their home was, time spent at each place, business ties, social ties, family ties, and other evidence, the tribunal determined that although the Hoffs intended to eventually change their domicile to Florida, they had not manifested that intent in 2018 or in 2019. During those 2 years, they spent more time in New York than in Florida, retained their New York residence, had substantial business ties in New York, and had memberships in 2 New York country clubs, which they put a lot of emphasis on. Although the Hoffs provided documentation, including Florida driver's licenses, voter registration in Florida, a declaration of Florida domicile, and the creation of trusts and wills subject to Florida law, the tribunal noted precedent that such formal declarations of domicile could be self-serving and are less significant than informal acts or declarations revealing a person's general habit of life. And they really focused on the general habit of life here. The Hoffs' documentation showed only their intention to eventually relocate to Florida. It did not negate their evidence that they regarded New York as the place they intended to return to, and thus their domicile in 2018 and 2019 was determined to be New York. The tribunal sustained the notices of deficiency for the back taxes owed. So the main takeaways from this case are the tribunal acknowledged that minimizing tax exposure is a legitimate reason for establishing a domicile in a different state, but taxpayers must clearly manifest their intention via, and this is the key, via objective criteria and other verifiable information that they regard a new state as their permanent place of abode. And that's the key. It's got to be objective criteria that is used to do that. Attorneys should advise clients that merely spending time in another state, even substantial time, and providing documentation that the new state is their domicile may be insufficient to avoid taxation in the original state, where other circumstances and behaviors tend to negate their intention to regard the new state as their permanent home. So a very important case out of New York to determine domicile.